It's the 17th of June, 2022. I'm Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. You are welcome. It always takes me a moment to get this up to nuclear bashing speed. Bear with me. So this model is a 20-day model. It's modeled up to the 31st of March 2011. This is 11 years ago, this model. In 2011, in November, the Japan Times, one of the biggest medias in Japan, the Japan Times, said as the public possibly worldwide sickens over time, the truth will come out about Fukushima. This map is a model of radioactive fallout by France from Fukushima. That model is a 16-day model. This is a 40-day model from NOAA, the radioactive fallout. This is a headline from 2014, 3 years later. Deteriorating nuclear meltdown threatens mass extinction around the world. So the radioactive fallout annihilates the species in increments, but most people can't perceive what's happening because it starts at the very bottom of the food chain and trickles its way up and then it snowballs. We launched research expeditions to Alaska from Vancouver, British Columbia, year after year after year after year. And what we discovered was by 2012, these pictures are pre-2011, before Fukushima. 11 years ago, that's what the coastline looked like over there. Here's what it looked like after. The coastline didn't recover, it didn't recede itself. And so we've done research expeditions year after year. And what we discovered was it was an extinction event. To our incredible shock and horror, the media refused to acknowledge it. Universities refuses to acknowledge that the species are gone. And so the cover-up is quite shocking. And to most people, they probably can't comprehend it. It's not your fault. You've been brainwashed with propaganda your whole life. Stay around and join the winning team. You'll get up to speed. The species to your left are 11 years ago. They no longer exist. You will never see them again. You will never take those pictures again. These are authentic before and after pictures. It's an extinction event. It's time to wake up. It's time to make a stand. This is Earth's last stand. Which side are you on? And so we've done these research expeditions for many months, year after year, in adverse conditions. This is typically what it looks like on each day. That's me on a typical day. And this is me at the end of a typical day. Miserable, soaking wet, no color, no species, and everybody attacking me for going out and having a look. Been under siege for going out and taking pictures made me the worst criminal in human history. for asking a question. What you see in that time was the green sea anemones out of the 84 species, and each comes in multiple colors. They were the ones we can find, but they were very rare. That was a very rare to get that footage. Those were babies. They were about the size of my thumb. And that was really rare to see babies of any species, including starfish or starfish on the entire coastline. Our last video was 2 hours and 23 minutes and 17 seconds. 12 hours later, it was 9 seconds longer. So it was 9 seconds longer. Every one of my videos after 12 hours are extended between 6+ seconds. Every video. Exactly 12 hours later. Is that normal? No. Increasingly economical renewables mean now no time to cling to nuclear power. That's South Korea. We have a poll tonight that some people are confused about, I noticed. It happens. Is Russia military a coward for using nuclear power plants as a base in war? Some people think that Russia's protecting the bases. Okay, so let's look at that kind of logic for a second. Russia is going into a nuclear power plant, setting up weapons, and firing their weapons. And you can't fire back at them because they're at a nuclear power plant. What part about that is confusing to people? I'm confused myself. But congratulations. It's not confusing if you're honest. If you go into a nuclear power plant and use that place as a human shield, basically, so you can fire your weapons, but nobody can fire back at you because you're at a nuclear power plant. That's not protecting a nuclear power plant. That's using a weapons of mass destruction as a shield. A nuclear meltdown is much worse than a nuclear weapon. It's infinitely worse than a nuclear weapon. So there's some dissent coming out of South Korea, who has a new administration, a new president / prime minister, or whatever lobbyists call them down there at this day and age. The new administrator's nuclear power advocacy runs counter to global trends towards renewables. The new administration's, because the previous administration was going to pull the plug on all nuclear. This one wants to ramp it up. The next one will pull the plug on it, most likely. A new report released by the International Renewable Energy Agency revealed global solar and wind generations costs are down 13 and 15% compared to a year ago. The global weighted average levelized cost of electricity of new onshore wind projects in 2021 fell by 15% year on year, while that of new utility scale solar and offshore wind both declined 13%. 2021 renewable shares of total power generation capacity reached 81%. It seems these figures continue to improve as the economy gets stronger. In Korea, however, the perception that nuclear power equals cheap energy is still strong. This is despite the fact that globally renewable energy dominates nuclear power in terms of economic feasibilities. And according to a report by Lazar a global asset management company, October last year, the average cost of electricity per megawatt hour of solar power fell by 90%, from $359 per megawatt hour in 2009 to $36 last year. And that wind power fell 72%, from $135 to $38. Comparatively, nuclear power saw a 36% increase in costs, from $123 to $167 during the same period. In fact, nuclear power has already become 4.5 times more expensive than renewable. Too cheap to meter, Dana. In fact, nuclear power has become 4.5 times more expensive than renewable energy. Nuclear power has. Construction costs for the plants are increasing as safety regulations are strengthened after Fukushima. Europe seems to be choosing to expand its use of renewables as a solution to its current energy crisis. South Korea, however, is running counter to the trend by advocating to become a leader in the nuclear power field. You gotta, like most countries are getting nuclear power can't afford it. Russia has to fund it. The plan is to lower the existing renewable energy targets, which stand at 30.2%. by 2030 because it's perceived as being too high. So too much renewables is not a good thing for South Korea is what they're claiming. That's the nuclear industry, see? Very well positioned in key positions in government. They've captured your universities, your medias, your regulatory agencies, and they're completely out of control. In the changing times, it is unfortunate that South Korea is choosing to cling to the dirty nuclear industry, the marketability of which is becoming increasingly unclear. So that's quite the thrashing. Well done. The Pacific faces a radioactive future. Again, this is where they want you to believe that all the water used to spray on the reactors is in tanks. It's such a ludicrous assertion. It defies logic that there's actually a single human on the entire planet that believes that. It really, to me, it does anyway, because if you actually look at the scale of what we're talking about, you would need 12 billion tanks or something like that to accommodate the amount of water that they sprayed over it. And this was cooked up by the Paris Accord from France in 2015. Japan plans to dump the radioactive water. First off, the water that we're talking about is 2.2 sieverts a liter. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. You'll die a week or 2 weeks later. So 2 liters is a lethal dose for just a short period of time. So if you fill up these tanks, now they're only acknowledging beta, by the way. They're not acknowledging alphas, neutrons, gammas, the X-rays from all of these emitters hitting each other. If you filled up all tank, rather, that's 1.4 million sieverts per tank of just beta. Pretend that gammas and alphas and neutrons, like uranium, plutonium, don't exist. That is just beta. Do you see the ludicrousness of that? But what that means is you can't build another tank. Did you hear me? You can't build another tank. If you can't build another tank, if you can't build another tank, then how do you build the other tanks? You can't. Well, what happens is you can't get back on the site. Another problem with that story is that in 2013 they had 1,000 tanks. Guess how many tanks they got today? 1,000 tanks. In a normal operating reactor using 1 million gallons a minute, that's 1,440 minutes a day times 1 million gallons, or 1,440 times a day at 4,500 tons a minute. For a typical reactor, they have multiple reactors melted down, and they would need a lot more water. You could fill all the tanks up 6 times a day. The lousy 1,000 tanks. So the idea of telling you it was 1,000 tanks was to make you complacent and understanding the harm that is caused from that going into the ocean. Remember, the ocean makes tens of thousands of miles of clouds every day. Rain clouds that go in and hit your mountains, where they lose a large percentage of their payloads before they can climb over the mountains. So when you talk about 1.3 million tons of radionuclide contaminated water, so whoever wrote the story probably shouldn't be allowed to write, because they don't know anything about the topic whatsoever. They're just regurgitating something from United Nations, probably, which is a military-industrial complex of 195 militaries. They're not supposed to exist. Why would Canada, United States, need a corporation telling them how to think and act and talk and walk for? Fukushima Beach in the former evacuation zone, nuclear wasteland, reopens in Naraha. A swimming beach in Naraha in Fukushima Prefecture opened on Saturday for the first time in 11 years. The nuclear event, the beach became the first bathing resort to reopen an area once covered by evacuation orders and they're claiming there's only a triple meltdown. Again, these people can't stop but lie every time they open their pie holes. So they admit 1, 2, and 3 melted down. They're claiming reactor 4 didn't melt down. And so when you're changing the fuel, you're only taking a percentage of the fuel out. The rest of it stays in the reactor. And it's no good for me to tell you anything unless I show you a picture, is it? Not only that, there's 8 fuel pools in the 4 buildings they're gone to. So that's just 4 of the medias that pretend that they're at the fuel pool 100 feet above the wreckage of reactor 4 to your left. They're claiming that didn't melt down. So why is it completely destroyed then? Anybody? Does anybody think that they're in the ghost pool 100 feet above the carnage to the left? Let's keep it rolling. We were out on the trail, and I'd apologize that the video was sketchy and shakery and bad quality. I didn't know that. You don't know that when you're out there on the road. And I couldn't see the screen because for some reason the brightness on my screen was turned right down. And if you know me, that is never happens. I never turn. Why would you turn the brightness of your screen all the way down? Like, I can barely see my hand in front of me right now. Triple meltdowns. It's meltdowns. Triple nuclear reactor meltdown. But you won't find that in a sentence for some reason. The beach is located 25 kilometers. So it's 25 kilometers from that creature right there. And they just opened it because of high radiation. So then the question is, if you're just opening the beach 25 miles away after 11 years, how is it safe for the last 11 years to be at the nuclear meltdown site itself? And then the big question, of course, is why is the media pretending they're in a fuel pool that doesn't exist in the building to the left? So that's a pretty big, risky thing to do, is to pretend you're in a fuel pool. That's desperation. Like, I don't have anything to compare that to. What would compel the major medias, in order, you got to have the videographers, the sound people, the producers, the editors, the owners of the medias, all of them have to participate in that deception. Why would you do something like that over a lousy building that broke down? Evacuation orders be lifted for parts of Fukushima town 25 kilometers away, folks. And you're eating food in Canada from that, inside that zone, by the way. Canada removed all restrictions. Canada was covered in massive radioactive plumes. Sustained. We've had serious damage on both the Pacific and the East Coast. Where I'm to, it's basically, you can't have a conversation with the average person. They're completely disconnected from Mother Nature. Evacuation orders to be lifted for parts of Fukushima town. It's just surreal. Now, this is Okuma. This is a different story. Okuma. Now, this is just a couple of kilometers away from the multiple nuclear meltdowns. They're going to lift restrictions for around 10% of the town. So you can't cross the street, and you can't go to the beaches 25 miles away. But you're okay right alongside ongoing multiple nuclear reactors melting down with constant radioactive fallout. The nuclear industry is completely kooky, batshit lunatic. Makes up 10% of the whole town. So the town right alongside of it, you can only open up 10% of it 11 years later. And the beach 25 kilometers away was only open up 11 years later. Not that it's safe, but it was opened up by the industry, not by academics or universities or something. And this is priceless. Here they are opening them up the gates. You got a couple of useful idiots with their umbrellas. And you got your media. Look at the people there saluting the police. Saluting the police. And look at the bizarre media, the pandering media in the background to the right. It's the calling it a cult doesn't really do it justice. It's way worse than that. Oh yeah, let me see. Russia's accused of shelling from a nuclear plant in Ukraine. So they're using a nuclear plant as a human shield, basically. You can't fire back at the nuclear power plant. Storing weapons in a nuclear plant. Now, the idea of using a nuclear power plant is nobody can shoot at them. They can shoot all they want, but you can't shoot back at them. Because then if you hit one of the storage, these sites are they got some of the most fuel rods stored anywhere in Europe are at some of these nuclear plants in Ukraine, for goodness sakes. So the poll tonight is Russia military a coward for putting their weapons at a nuclear plant site and firing them, because that's the story, right? Was they were actually firing, if I can find it. Russia accused of shelling from a nuclear power plant, which means you can't shell them back. You can't shoot back at them, right? They're not doing that to protect the nuclear power plant, folks. For goodness sakes, just think about it before you say stuff like that, because it's not helping us by thinking that Russia's trying to protect the nuclear power plant. It's simply not true. If it was, you wouldn't be firing shells from it, or you wouldn't be storing weapons there, right? Heat wave. I mean, because the Americans got all kinds of drones and they got all kinds of missiles sent into there every month from NATO countries. And so Russia's just using it as a place to hide and to launch weapons, because you can't shoot back at them. If you knock out the external power to the nuke plant, you risk a meltdown, because you have to run on external power supplies, right? Heat wave. French nuclear plants temporarily allowed to discharge overheated water, and the rivers are super low in France right now. Stupid France, stupid nuclear. 70% of France's fresh water goes to nuclear. Try wrapping your mind around that idiocracy. And they got lots of coastline they could have built their nuclear reactors on. Why do something that makes sense, right? None of it makes sense. I just can't figure out how 28% thinks Russia's not a coward for using nuclear power plants as a base in war. That's a coward thing to do, because you can poison the whole planet. It's actually a coward thing to do. Radiation covers the whole planet in a short while after an event, right? 3 French nuclear disease factories have been temporarily exempt from heat regulations to allow them to run at minimum power. There's no such thing as minimum power during current heat wave with nuclear. Nuclear don't run at minimum. Minimum is very high power, folks. Their version of minimum is an absurd amount of power. You can't shut a nuclear plant off, like just shut it off. It's a long, slow process to come to a stop. It never stops. The chain reaction will never stop, right? Nuclear plants pump in water from waterways to cool their reactors, discharge it again. But they don't boil up those big fat stacks. Since 2006, limits have been set to the maximum temperature the water given off by each nuclear plant in France may have. This is aimed at preventing flora and fauna from being damaged by excessively hot water. Lots of people die at this period because they can't. Because we covered that years ago, right? Nuclear plants are not, and particularly in France, nuclear plants are not allowed to discharge hot water without heat limitations. Really? What, you think they're really going to stop? Is anybody that stupid? They actually think that the nuclear power plant is just going to... You can't just stop a nuclear power plant. You have to foresee it and then not have it running. You can't just stop it. You can't say, oh, well, the water's too hot, shut it down. France has half its reactors are shut down. It can't afford to shut down a reactor on top of that. So the 3 plants they got named there, I looked them up, all 3 of them are surrounded by farms. It's disgusting. It's surreal. No risk to the French power supply. Really? When the French can't keep up with it because half their reactors are shut down? Nothing was said about the possible consequences for biodiversity. France has no fewer than 56 reactors, and almost half, of which more than half, 29 have been shut down. So it's actually more than half. The problem is if you're eating food from these farms, you're getting sick and poisoned. Deep isolation, putting it, like if you put everything down, the problem is with deep isolation that if you put everything in a hole in the ground, it's going to melt down. It could be 5 years or 50 years, 10 years or 1,000 years, but it will melt down. It doesn't need oxygen, see? It'll consume all the steel and the rebar at 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. It'll consume all the gravel and rocks that fall down on it till there's a fucking hole there. And then it'll emit radiation till there's no life left on the planet. It's a curse. We got no way of getting rid of it. Everything is vented into the environment because everything is still splitting the atom. It's the most idiotic... there's no polite way to say it. It's a genocide machine, basically. You can't stop the disease factory from producing constant isotopes. It's still constant. The fuel pools, stuff in the fuel reactor cores, instead of powering millions of homes, in each fuel pool, there's 1,000 of them, and multiple reactor cores in each pool. So each day, instead of powering millions of homes, they're still split in the same atoms, but there's no containment, and they're released into the environment. Do you get it? It's the worst case scenario for a planet, is a nuclear power plant. It's the worst case scenario for 8 million species. As the International Energy Agency says, reaching net zero, which is Miles Allen. I really want to punch him in the mouth after all these years. Piece of shit. Wrote a paper. They called it net zero. I'll bring it up for you in a second. And then that's been weaponized against humanity now for quite a few years. So is carbon footprint, which was created by BP Oil, after a major oil spill, they had a public relation campaign. Oh my God, I haven't got that transferred. Because we had to move everything over last week to a new session, right? Yeah, goodness. Just hang on a second. I just wanted to see if... I'm going to have to make sure I transfer all that over tomorrow. Just one more check here. Oh, there's BP Oil. There's Miles Allen coming up. Oh, I do got it. Okay, hang on. Just got to wait for the system to catch up. Ooh, cuckoo, cuckoo. That's a score today. Put that right there. So Miles Allen he's the physicist behind net zero. He got a nice cushy job with UN. Steve, or I can't remember his name now. I'm missing the other piece. He's the father of global warming. He's the father of net zero. BP Oil is the father of carbon footprint. The idea of personal carbon footprint was popularized by a large advertising campaign of fossil fuel company BP 2005. It was intended to divert attention from the fossil fuel industry's major flaws. Right, they got to come up with a distraction, see? And Mr. Climate Change, James Piece of Shit Hansen, he gave a single 15-minute 1988 congressional testimony on climate change. And his testimony was pivotal, important turning point in the history of global climate change. A lousy 15 minutes of a known professional lawyer, James Hansen, and it's official beginning the global warming policy debates. So back to the story. At least 30 countries are considering or planning or starting nuclear power programs, according to the Scumbag World Nuclear Association, which is a nuclear lobbying group. Most of these countries are impoverished countries that can't actually afford a nuclear program, so Russia is going to pay for it. But without a permanent waste solution, can nuclear truly be considered clean? No, well, the fuel pools are hemorrhaging radiation into the environment. That's the gallows laugh, because the implications of what I'm saying are catastrophic for 8 million species. It's not a game. The planet can't sustain it another second. And the problem with the fuel is splitting the atoms. You know the atoms? Does everybody remember the atoms? The radioactive fallout atoms? I guess some smaller ones. It is E equal MC square. Cuckoo, kichu. So these atoms are constantly hemorrhaging from the fuel pools of all 1,000 plus fuel pools worldwide. Most of the gas are vented the same thing because the fuel is still splitting the atom. It's a catastrophic event We got to stop it at all costs. And every university should be working on coming up with a solution with each other worldwide. It should be unprecedented. It should be treated like a meteorite is coming at your planet. And building deep geological repositories is not affordable or scalable for many countries. Yeah, digging a hole in the ground is too difficult for these morons. But putting it down in the hole means you can't retrieve it if you come up with a solution. But it also means at some point it's going to melt down, right? If water ingresses in there, liter of water expands 1,200 foot in a millisecond, and so you'll split the earth. That's known as the China syndrome. We see it at Fukushima, the China syndrome, where steam's coming out of the ground in 6 places in just one report at 10 sieverts an hour. 3 sieverts is a lethal dose. So then the steam, of course, is accumulating. So now it's no longer 10 sieverts because the Geiger counters are maxed out at 10. They're stationary. So you have to evacuate the site. And we show a lot of that documentation. I'm not going to do it tonight. It's been a long, crazy day. The European Union's recently approved taxonomy, which was the industry, the nuclear industry, approved called nuclear green, it was by a margin winning the vote. On top of that, it should never have won the vote. It's absurd to suggest that nuclear has any green attributes. It's absurd. It's such an evil industry. It defies any common sense. Co-founder Liz Muller. That's the company, right? And we've covered her for over a decade. She's only been at it, I think it's 6 years or something, but rather. So it was her and her, I think it was her and her father started up the company or something. And they're just going to use boreholes where they drop cash down there and pack it in with whatever, right? It's like they've been saying that for 50 years. I'm going to dig a big hole in the ground. She started up a company to do it. And so she's put on a pedestal as if she's the savior, and she's the opposite, and she knows it. Belgium's asked NG to keep nuclear plant open amid energy crunch. So the whole world has said they're not going to touch Russia's gas or oil. And now we see, and when they done that, I had made a video and started off by saying, if the world doesn't take that, that means massive inflation. Nuclear plant owner claims false alarm happened during a test. New Hampshire senator demands answers. New Hampshire. Now, this story's got a few more twists to it. They definitely had an event. They definitely had a release there for sure. I'll explain that coming up. New Hampshire residents were warned to evacuate the vicinity because of a problem. And we've covered this over the last couple of shows. U.S. Senator of New Hampshire is requesting a full review of what caused an emergency alarm to be falsely activated. Because there's a big chain of command. There's a huge change of command. So there was 9 sirens activated, and the speaker system was activated. And there was a message to please evacuate the beaches. But the person doing the messaging was real time. This wasn't a pre-recorded message. And you can tell they were stuttering. They were trying to be calm. It was very clear that they weren't calm. And the people that would have been given the message would have been in the know. They had an event there and covered it up, but there's more evidence coming up for that. The emergency alarms went off, warning many in the area there was a problem at the nuclear disease factory power plant and advising them to evacuate. It caused chaos and left police, fire, and state and local officials with no answers. Not few answers, but no answers. There's more stories about that coming up, some revelations actually. In reversal, PG&E to seek federal nuclear credits for Diablo Canyon, which is on a fault line, right? That's why they were closing it down, because it's in a very dangerous spot. These reactors become embrittled from the nuclear bombardment and the metal. 90% of the site is bombarded by neutrons. Department of Energy urged to rethink nuclear energy push in the Philippines. Well, I'll get rid of the radioactive fallout here. Hang on. Because you breathe it in, it lands on everything you touch. It ends up in your clothing, in your laundry. It ends up in your water supply. All your cooking, your cleaning, your showers, your laundries. As it upkeep can be more costly than operating existing nuclear or power plants, a think tank said on Saturday. I'm actually a think tank at nuclearproctologist.org. And we're anti-nuclear in space because the sun doesn't create these elements. These are man-made, anthropogenic. And what that means is your body doesn't have an autoimmune trigger to defend yourself from it. Well, some studies, the minute you hear the word some studies, show nuclear energy is cheaper than other renewables, because the last show we covered this fake study claiming the same thing, right? These do not take into account the cost of disposing nuclear waste. It doesn't take into the cost of the constant hemorrhaging from the fuel pool from decades from nuclear power sites into the communities, into the environment, into the biosphere, the ecosystem. Marcos earlier said that he wants to study the revival of the Beitan nuclear power plant. They shut this down because of Chernobyl in '86, right? And that's when this plant was supposed to come online the same year. So they shut it down. Apparently they didn't put any fuel in the reactor. There was no fuel. It was never started up, right? But now, all these years, 36 years later, you're talking about old technology, you're talking about obsolete technology, you're talking about embrittlement just from time itself, and that the original people who built it don't work in this industry anymore. And so this is how crazy nuclear industry actually is. It actually wants to restart an old... We see this many times over the years, an old abandoned nuclear power plant. Should instead consider renewable energy sources such as wind, solar, tidal power, right? Of course. Well, what you should be using is geothermal and tidal energy. You back that up with wind and solar, right? So geothermal is 24 hours a day. Energy. Tidal energy is 24 hours a day, predictable thousands of years down the road. And so then you back it up with wind and solar, and you back all of that up with storage, compressed air storage where you dig mine shafts, and you compress air down there. And you can do this anywhere because it's low pressure, 120 psi. And that the heat from compressing can be stored in salt, and you can unpack it and expand the air with the heat that you harvested from in the first place. So it's a very efficient way of storing energy, incredibly efficient. And that covers your peak power for your major cities of millions of people. It's a perfect way to do it. Anybody trying to convince you to use batteries is either an idiot, or has a vested interest. Hundreds planned at a nuclear-free pro-Indy march at Fastlane, United Kingdom. Surrounded by farms, by the way that place is. All under one banner have organized a march for nuclear-free Scotland on July the 30th. Of the Fastlane Naval Base, we've covered them many times. Hundreds are expected who will be marching for both independence and a nuclear-free Scotland, like an independent Scotland from United Kingdom. They keep all their nuclear weapons in Scotland from United Kingdom, by the way. Organizers state the increased risk of a nuclear war as a result of the war in Ukraine has placed Scotland in the firing line as the United Kingdom's nuclear fleet is held at Fastlane, 40 miles from Glasgow. And Fastlane shouldn't exist with all the accidents they've had. This is a democratic outrage, which does not have the support of the Scottish people. These weapons of mass destruction play no useful role because you can't use them. They're stupid. They're just they're resource eaters and money eaters, and then they create this big defense industry to protect them from people like themselves, idiots. They put all of us at risk. They exist only as a means of giving the UK a seat at the table, besides other imperialist powers who seek to control and dominate the planet, both politically, economically, by military power. That would be NATO, which is 30 militaries, and United Nations, which is 195. The ice is a bit loud tonight, eh? Organizers state that a central pillar of the Scottish independent campaign must be immediately removed. Is the immediate removal of nuclear weapons from Scotland once independence has been achieved. And moreover, the new Scumbag UN treaty, these are scumbags on a whole different level, eh? UN is despicable. On the prohibition of nuclear weapons, the very people promoted nuclear weapons. It took them 70 years to get enough countries to say they didn't want nuclear weapons. Surreal, isn't it? The International Atomic Energy Agency, this is a criminal organization of inbreeds. There's not a single morsel of good in the United Nations, certainly not in the Atomic Energy Agency. It's absurd to include them in anything. They're a disease on our planet. Debate over nuclear weapons in Scotland has picked up fever once more because of the Ukraine invasion with Russia. So this has been used as a catalyst to bludgeon the entire planet now since February. Some, such as Philip O'Brien, a professor of strategic studies, great, at the University of St. Andrews, said the drop tried it now when Russia was invading Ukraine and threatening to use nuclear weapons would send the wrong message. Even if you're not a supporter of nuclear weapons, this would seem to be the wrong time to say we are getting rid of them because you're now having them used in threatening behavior against you. The problem is there is a few good people at universities, but eventually they will become corrupt. The 99% of the university professors are corrupt or corrupting. And corrupt professors will corrupt the students. Even if you're not a supporter. Shut up. However, the Scottish Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament previously told the National that the tragedy unfolding in Ukraine only underlines the urgent need to eliminate nuclear weapons, stating that Fast Lane Coalport complex makes Scotland a prime target. Here. Yeah, what else is new? Boris the idiot, Boris the monster Johnson, host a farewell party instead of working. Got a heat wave coming through that's going to probably kill a lot of people. The hottest they've ever seen in the United Kingdom. And Boris Johnson is throwing parties. The news comes despite an unprecedented heat wave set to hit the UK, which experts warn could kill thousands. And in that case, it probably will. Johnson, who refused to step down as Prime Minister, immediately, despite 50 resignations from his government, was accused of ditching responsibility. Well, obviously, you don't need to accuse him. It's obviously he's ditching his responsibility. To have an unprecedented heat wave, the hottest it's ever been, and he's out having a party. See, temperatures hit 40 degrees for the first time on records. You can see 1,500 to 2,000 deaths just from this one period of heat. High temperatures next week unlikely to affect the British nuclear plants, says EDF. You'd have to be insane to listen to France's EDF. You literally have to be sane. How come Britain can't build their own nuclear power plants? Nuclear preparedness exercise held biannually. See all the farmers' fields in the background? Because why not? And all the radiation, not all of it, but a lot of radiation ends up in the farmlands. Local emergency agencies received good feedback this week from drills at a nuclear plant. Held every other year, evaluated local organizations, including first responders. What the fuck is a first responder going to do at a nuclear meltdown? You're going to run away like he does at every other nuclear meltdown, Dana? Oh, that's right. Happy anniversary, Cordova nuclear plant. So that's the same plant? They had a license extension 1 year ago. Senator Bruce Rauner will travel to southwestern Illinois Tuesday to celebrate the 1 year anniversary. He signed the Future Energy Jobs Act. Because it's keeping the plant open, keeps 800 jobs. It's going to poison everybody so they can have 800 more jobs. The idiot, welcome to the idiot world of nuclear. And they're celebrating their idiocracy on top of that. Idaho nuclear waste treatment plant making progress. Does anybody actually believe that? The nuclear waste treatment plant, Eastern Idaho, designed to treat 900,000 gallons, 3.4 million liters of sodium-bearing radioactive waste. And this is like, whoa, per liter waste. We get a load of this at their 890 square mile nuclear wasteland. 2,300 square kilometer nuclear wasteland. The Idaho National Laboratory, which is on one of the biggest aquifers, recently treated. What they mean by that is that they're going to encase it. Convert the liquid waste into a more easily managed granulated solid. Yeah, they've tried this before. It's never worked. The liquid waste came from processing spent nuclear fuel to recover highly enriched in uranium. In other words, this is brutal radioactive materials. The waste is in tanks above the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer that supplies water to cities and farms. All of these national laboratories and waste repositories are right smack in the center above the biggest aquifers, freshwater aquifers in those parts of the country. And every one of them is incredibly polluted on top of that. The waste is in tanks above the Eastern Snake Plain Aquifer, supplying water to all the communities. The department is paying fines to Idaho for missing a deadline from 1995. The deadline is 2005, 2015. It's 27 years ago, the deadline. For 900,000 gallons. So you have to pay a fine for the last 25 years. Is preventing the department from bringing in research quantities of spent nuclear fuel to be studied at the labs. Well, it's illegal, right, to have mixed oxide fuel facilities in the United States. That doesn't stop the industry from almost doing it on a number of occasions, right? They spent $18 billion on the Savannah River Max fuel facility there a couple of years ago, right? And then they gave up on it. $18 billion. If the treatment plant is successful, it's never been successful anywhere else on the planet. You're 25 years behind schedule. Will be stored at the plant, the same place, in stainless steel canisters. It'll be shipped to WIP when nobody's paying attention, is what will happen. And that will eventually be disposed of at National Geologic Repository. However, no such repository exists. So, Alzheimer's in Chief Biden has issued the Atomic Veterans Medal. There's not very many of them left, right? Most of them have died from cancers and kidney failure and all kinds of illnesses from the radiation. But after 75 years, they're going to give them survivors who are almost 100 years old medals. Yeah, sounds about right. Nuclear industry is disgusting. So July the 16th, yesterday, was National Atomic Veterans Day. He said, we recognize the brave service of the American atomic veterans. Yeah, 75 years later, you recognize them, do you? Well, most of them are dead, and there's only 1% or 2% left, isn't it? The whole bloody thing is nothing but lunatics, isn't it? What the hell, man? We got a poll tonight. And so, is Russia this is not... You don't have to be smart to understand this. Is Russia's military coward for using nuclear power plants as human shields? So they can fire weapons, but you can't shoot back at them. And a miraculous 26% of the people said no. Like, what fucking planet are you on? Like, really, what bizarre planet are you actually on? Say no. What kind of fucking weird, twisted little world do you live in to say no? Seriously. You think it's okay to go to a nuclear fucking power plant and shoot weapons and so you won't be shot back at, do you? You gotta get your fucking priorities straight out there. The fuck, boy? The story of the Soviet 3M Bison bombers that was going to nuke Europe if the Cuban Missile Crisis. So that's the scary thing about this industry is you build these things and you give someone this job and they'll fucking do it. They're stupid enough they'll actually do it. Like you can't have a nuclear war. Literally nobody or nothing wins. You can't even cash a check on Friday, morons. That's the scary part. You give someone a uniform, put them in that fucking thing right there, and tell them to go drop a nuke. They're like, yeah, I'll do it. I'm stupid. I'll do it. Reshaping the UK's energy regime in an uncertain political landscape. I swear to fuck the media. The media can't even tie their own shoes. Reform the UK energy system, protect consumers from unfair pricing. The UK government in recent times focused on climate change targets. No, this was propaganda to get their way. Nuclear is climate change. It's the first major economy in the world to enshrine a commitment to achieving net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050 into law in 2019. And it's been used just to destroy the impoverished in the country, hasn't it? Battery-based and pumped hydro energy storage projects. Why would you use batteries when you can use compressed air storage anywhere on the planet? Dig a mine shaft anywhere on the planet and compress air down there. The technology is like 80 years old. It was obsolete 80 years ago. So why would you use batteries? Because batteries are not achievable, see? And even if they are, why would you do that when you can have compressed air storage? They'll spend $1 trillion on a bomb, but they won't spend $100 on what's right or wrong. The Nuclear Installation Act 1965 will be amended to clarify that fusion energy facilities will not be subject to nuclear site licensing requirement. And that's absurdness, by the way. And therefore not be regulated under the same regulatory regime as nuclear fission, but instead regulated by the health and safety executives and environmental regulators. So they're setting us up for killing. First off, you don't need it if you actually come up with solutions for energy storage, the geothermal and tidal energy, backed up with wind and solar, backed up by compressed air pumped hydro storage, and any other new technology that has those attributes. But the regulatory agencies you've got are dysfunctional. They're completely one-sided lunatics. The UK government aims to attract investments with the following measures. The bill will enhance the nuclear third-party liability by enabling UK accession to a second international nuclear third-party liability treaty. Compensation for damage in case of a nuclear accident. Oh, you mean the Price-Anderson Act. So what the industry did was Because nobody insures a nuclear power plant, right? Nobody's that gullible or stupid to insure a nuclear power plant. So there's a limit to what the nuclear power plant can owe you. But they will never have the money to pay that, so it has to be paid by the taxes. If, in fact, they're ever actually confronted with those expenses. Global energy prices skyrocketed in 2022 after Russia's invasion of Ukraine. So Russia invaded tons of countries. We didn't ban their resources because you would cause unmitigated inflation worldwide. But I mean, you have oil fields on the eastern Canada. You've been capping them for 45 years. You don't need Russia. You don't need anybody. You have all the oils already here. Opinion, we still need fuel on our way to a greener future, while also investing in green alternatives like nuclear. See, since the EU has voted last week on the taxonomy claiming nuclear has some green attributes, the whole planet now is screaming nuclear is green. It's like, what? What the fuck just happened? Just because batshit crazy EU claimed nuclear was green doesn't mean it doesn't. Nuclear is the most carbon intensive thing in human history. Calling it green is saying I'm stupid. That's what you're doing when you call nuclear green. You're saying I'm a fucking idiot. I'm a moron. Another way to expand energy generation through the efforts of Nuclear Regulatory Commission's Advanced Reactor Program, where 9 companies are working through regulatory approval for at least 10 years. And they still have another decade to go before they can start construction and generation. Again, right, you're talking 20 years. And then time you actually build the first model, that's another 10 years. That's 30 years. Now you got to get the kinks out of it. That takes another 10 years. That's 40 years. So now you got to redesign it. The engineers do. I apologize. Yeah, a lot of heat today here on the East Coast. So once you get all the kinks out of it 40 years down the road, and the new design, you gotta rebuild it. Now it's ready for market. So now the inflation has gone skyrocket 40 years down the road. Let's keep it rolling here. The Air Force once flirted with basing new ICBMs in lakes and tunnels. Tunnels and lakes and lakes and tunnels and tunnels and lakes and lakes and tunnels. Not that anybody's surprised, right? Is anybody surprised? Anybody shocked? Instead, they decided to put it in farmers' fields. I'll show you. Otherwise, it's not real, right? I could never have a radio show because I like working myself unconscious all the time with the documentation. But people still come and stump me. So instead of putting it in lakes and tunnels, they just put it in all your farmer fields. And if you attack any of them, then you're attacking the farmer, the little community, not the nuclear missile silo. And then it'll come out weeks later that there was a nuclear missile silo there. So what's worse, putting it in all the little communities or putting it in lakes and tunnels? Don't answer it, because there's a percentage of them out there will say, oh, well, Dana, that was the better spot. Why does the federal government say nuclear waste is safe for New Mexico despite objections? The Non-Regulatory Commission issued its final environmental impact statement Wednesday for a project for New Jersey-based Holtec, which is Chris Singh, right? Lunatic Chris Singh International, seeking to allay concerns that the facility would impact nearby oil and gas, blah, blah, blah. Oh, and agricultural farmland. Like, there's some kind of weird sickness with the nuclear industry where everything is, the most dangerous stuff should be put right where agricultural farms are too. Anybody who does that should be put in jail for the rest of their life, or hit with 100 tasers or whatever. Recommending a federal license be issued. Approval for the 40-year license. You have to be insane to give this industry a 10-year license, let a 40-year license. Would follow safety reviews, January 2023. Will consider any potential harm to people the facility can cause. Did I mention they're putting it in agricultural land? Everything is vented. Did I mention that? Carlsbad. Report says nuclear waste impact is small. The Non-Regulatory Commission contended it consulted with federal, state, indigenous leaders in Mexico in issuing the report, which also considered comments submitted by residents throughout the state. Oh, I'm sure it did. Transportations of the waste to the Holtec Chris Singh site would also have small impact, the Non-Regulatory Commission reported, as workers would be exposed no more than 2.5 RIMs. Not microsieverts or millisieverts or unisieverts, but RIMs. Compared to 0.32 RIMs, the Non-Regulatory Commission estimated the average person receives each year. You can't compare man-made with natural. The minute you do that, you're gone into degenerate scumbag mode. But of course, it's the Non-Regulatory Commission. But like, how can they call themselves a regulatory commission when they're conflating natural and man-made like that? For the point of deceiving and manipulating you. Transportation and waste to Chris Singh's Holtec site. Everything is vented on the transportation, folks. It's not a small impact. These isotopes are forever. And you only need one to make a human sick. How many do you need to make the insects and animals and birds sick? As workers would be exposed no more than 2.5 RIMs of radiation. No, you're not. It's not just RIMs. It's actual physical isotopes that's going to be breathing in or released into the environment, like Becquerels. So my Geiger count is not counting RIMs; it's counting atomic decays, physical atoms. 180 is a typical evacuation zone on a nuclear site. 260 is normal around here because of Fukushima radioactive fallout. Workers would be exposed no more than a banana. No, they didn't say that because I'd be freaking out if they didn't. They reported similar doses received during operations at the facility. The industry is, like, you're talking about right alongside of agricultural. It's going to be venting physical atoms into the environment. Physical atoms. New Mexico Governor Gisham hopes similar opposition from her state would prevent the project from continuing. And she got a really good argument. Argument posed risk to public safety and other industries. And her stance follows a lawsuit filed last year by New Mexico Attorney General Banderas against the Non-Regulatory Commission. The case against the Non-Regulatory Commission was dismissed in March by the U.S. District Judge James O. Brown. So it only takes one guy to defeat good intentions. So if he's pro-nuclear, bought off by the nuclear industry, then there's no resolution for facts. Who assert the court did not have the jurisdiction to rule in the matter. If they actually don't, Congress and Parliament don't have the authority to make it illegal to poison you with radiation. Only the non-regulatory commissions can do that. And they call themselves the nuclear regulatory commissions, but they're obviously a non-regulatory commission. They're obviously captured. No such case was filed in the U.S. courts. And Gisham condemned the non-regulatory commission's latest report as ignoring fears from leaders who could threaten the economic drivers and desires of the people of New Mexico. More nuclear waste repository could be open for decades. And then they showed a very unflattering picture of the descending voices. Way to go, Carlsbad, current August. Despite strong objections, concerns over public health, economy, scientific, natural resources, environment, and those of the tribal leaders, local governments, the people of New Mexico, the non-regulatory committee is effectively choosing profit over public interest, yeah. And nothing you can do about it. You don't have the authority to stop them on top of that. She worried the project proposed and designed as a temporary measure could become permanent, placing the risk of nuclear waste solely on New Mexico's shoulder, which is what we see anyway, right? That's what they're doing. And it's full steam ahead. $100 million contract award to ship nuclear waste to repositories near Carlsbad. Everything is vented on the highways on top of that. There is calls from lawmakers during upcoming session starting in January to produce legislations that could block the project from coming to fruition. And southeast New Mexico also hosts a uranium enrichment plant. So uranium enrichment plant is a disease factory in overdrive. The state does not contain any nuclear power plants that generates the kind of a waste Holtec Chris Singh desires to store. It's just a person with a company, see? And then signs warning you are down on the ground, pulled out of the ground. Way to go, Nuke Tart. Way to go. That's Sizewell C and Hinkley Point C. Two new plants are going to build in, or back and vice versa. Sizewell C investment firm Ready's Nuclear Fund, and they're going to invest. Greencoat Capital is considered creating a nuclear investment fund to take a stake in Sizewell C plant. And look at these plants, these two plants they're going to build in the United Kingdom are surrounded by farms. Evil on a whole different level, folks. Nothing says evil quite like nuclear. This is International Atomic Energy Agency last year created the IAEA Marie Curie Fellowship Program. And Marie Curie lost both of her hands. Are they going to tell the victims that? She couldn't wipe her own bum. She died an excruciating, brutal death from radiation poisoning. Not only that, her laboratory, they're still trying to clean that up in France. It's going to be decades before they clean up her laboratory. But the scumbag, degenerate creep, IAEA, has a fellowship. Has a fellowship program. Women from all over the world studying nuclear-related subjects are encouraged to apply to the IAEA Marie Curie Fellowship Program. Instant money to 150 brainwashed victims this year. Since its launch in 2020, it was created in 2020. It's disgusting to use Marie Curie's name. I want to show a picture of her with no hands. I want to have a picture there of 100 years later trying to clean up the laboratory. Just celebrate that. A bunch of punks, eh? They're just a bunch of punks. House military spending is a boon to the arms industry. So when hasn't it been? So you got $37 billion more than he asked for, which is like 800 plus billion. So you got $850 billion. An astonishing $850 billion. How much compressed air pumped hydro storage can you do for $850 billion, I wonder? How many windmills and solar energy, geothermal and tidal energy can you create each year with that kind of money, I wonder? There's nothing stupider than someone in a uniform as it is. Nothing stupider than someone in a uniform with that kind of money and those kind of weapons. The vast bulk of the added funds will go to pay the bottom lines of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, General Dynamics, the misery machines itself. By contrast, the increase for the military personnel and health was $1 billion. Corporate profit continues to come before the needs of Earth. Nuclear warheads, the Department of Energy, at an astonishing $850 billion. Just robbing the country, just robbing it. Blatant robbery. Doubled down on the Pentagon's 3-decade, $2 trillion nuclear weapons buildup. $2 trillion worth of nuclear weapons that you can't use. How many things could you fix in America with $2 trillion, I wonder? A revolution. You need a revolution. You need a massacre. Racing towards $1 trillion military budget that tolerates and encourages mind-blowing waste. And then rewards military-industrial complexes, political spending with unfathomable large contracts. Just another day in stupid land. Putin's missiles and arsenal of accidents as new Star Wars space threats emerge. One academic How is evaluated how defense can be built to combat it. We get bigger weapons, they get bigger weapons, we get bigger weapons, they get bigger weapons, we get bigger weapons, they get bigger weapons. Somebody pushes a button and we all fall down. Greg Entree is a clinical professor of space leadership, policy and business, and a visiting professor at Security Science Technology Institute from the fucking degenerate Imperial College of London. These degenerate scumbag. The Imperial College of London. This is a scumbag factory. That's a fucking scumbag factory right there. Regulate outer space before it's too late. And then the people that are going to come up with the regulations are degenerate scum. I just started taking turmeric. When should I expect to see health benefits? So turmeric, if I'm getting that right, who knows, I can screw up names pretty quick. I had a study that had looked at 1,600 studies on turmeric. It's really good for you. You can buy it by the pills. Super good for all kinds of issues, Promotes joint mobility, easing muscle soreness, protects cardiovascular, central nervous system, boosting brain functions, longevity. Yeah, turmeric is just brilliant. So, DCA doses. DCA doses. Let me see. Here's the basic rule of thumb. You start off at 10 milligrams a kilogram. So divide your body weight into 2.2. And then multiply it by 10 milligrams. And so, that's to start off. And then you can increase it, your body can tolerate it, typically up to 25, no problem. Orally, like just mix it in water and drink it down. And so you take half the dose in the morning, half the dose at night. I'm doing 25 milligrams per kilogram, so it's almost 2 grams a day. Almost 2 grams a day. So you can do it twice a week through intravenous, where you inject up to 100 milligrams a kilogram in the 250 milliliter bag, which is typically done in hospitals, right? Or say kilograms, 74 kilograms times 25 milliliters is 1,850 milligrams rather, which works out to 1.85 grams a day. Well, the search was 15 milligrams originally, but I changed it, right? So the general rule of thumb, the general rule of thumb was 2 weeks and then take a week off. But you also, because you can get some nerve problems on high doses, and there's things you can take to help anyway absorb this also. So if you start getting like your fingertips are numb and your toes and that, you want to cut back on your dose. You're reaching high levels in your body, so it's a waste. You need to wait 5 to 7 days for your body to use up what that is, right? Is in your body, and just start again. But black tea a couple of times a day for the caffeine works apparently really good with DCA. Vitamin B1. Vitamin B1 works really good for helping your body absorb. Where are we to here? It helps your body absorb it. And potassium also helps your body absorb it. And so these three nurses had done a presentation. That was the links that they used. And they were going through all the information on DCA, what was the common way of using it or of measuring it. But there's also the DCA site out there, which will basically tell you the same thing anyway. And it actually helps a wide variety of diseases, not just cancers. Right? It's really good for your heart. Like diabetes, chronic fatigue syndromes, because it rebuilds your blood. So it allows your body to carry oxygen and nutrition throughout your body normally, basically, is all it's really doing. It just rebuilds your blood's ability. So cancer plates up your blood. DCA unplates the blood. It's really good for strokes, heart attacks. Some of the tumors begin shrinking within hours. Think about that statement there. Some of the tumors actually begin shrinking within hours. But, right, if you're taking 25 milligrams or 20 milligrams or 15 milligrams per kilogram twice a day, you're dividing up the 1+ grams you're looking at. You divide that up into 2 doses, one in the morning, one in the evening. But you want to take potassium, you want to take vitamin B1, you want to take vitamin C, 500 to 2,500 milligrams. They typically come in 500 milligram pills. I'm doing 1,000 milligrams of vitamin C, 500 milligrams of potassium. I'm taking, I think the same for vitamin B1. And I'm using structured water when I'm drinking a lot of water. And then I'm doing about 1.5 grams plus a day. And I got to try to, like every couple of shows, I got to try to remind people about these doses, because you want to get this right, and you want to take a break after 2 weeks. And if you feel numbness in your fingertips, you got to actually take quite a lot before that's going to happen. But if you notice that happening, it means you're taking too much. So back off a little bit, take a little less, right? Take a break for a day or two and then start taking your normal doses. But after 2 weeks, take a break for 5 or 7 days. Excuse me. Tumors dramatically decreased in size. Did not suffer any toxic side effects. It's by maintaining normal cellular metabolism in cancer cells. And anti-tumor activity, yep. And they couldn't get adequate funding to do real human trials. Imagine that. You have something with no adverse side effects. That was just incredible. It killed every cancer it came in contact with and couldn't get independent funding. And then the nuclear industry took it over. And so now the nuclear industry claims it's okay, but you need to use it with chemotherapy. That's actually the most demonic thing imaginable to say. But the chemotherapy industry is massive. It's massive on a whole different scale. The whole thing is absurdness. But we'll keep reminding you about this. So DCA, if you look it up on Amazon.com, not Amazon.ca, but Amazon.com. So when you get your milligram, your first number is going to be a 1. So put a point on the other side of that. So it'll be 1 point, whatever the other numbers are. That's the quickest, easiest, dirtiest way to do it. And it's an accurate way to do it. Well, we're running up into, it's 20 to 1 a.m. in the morning here. I think we'll just let it go at that, right? We'll just end it on the turmeric. Did I even get that right? Turmeric? That's all we can do. And so we raised some money last week, a couple of donations. I'll just do a quick shout out so people know I got that. I'll get my glasses. Jean A donated 100. Thank you so much. That was perfect. And James Lucid donated 124 Canadian. That was awesome. And we chewed through that pretty quick the weekend. We had expenses to catch up on. And so, awesome. It was amazing to get right out of the blue, get that covered. And we put gas in the bike and took off out on the bike yesterday and today. No spiders in the woods. And seen a couple of little birds out in the woods, but they were very fleeting. And that was pretty close to the community when we seen them. And so we're not seeing spider webs in the forest. We're not seeing flocks of birds or anything like that. No diversity. Some little insects, of course. But not seeing wasps, not seeing bees. Thought I heard a bee, though, today. Lots and lots of flowers, but not seeing the pollinators. There's no migratory birds flying. And where we're to, you typically get 45 million. You get the biggest saltwater migratory of birds on the planet. Comes past where I'm to. For the last number of years, nobody's seen a flock of migratory birds. They're claiming we got a mass bird die-off of gannets, of course, and murres happening here right now. And they're claiming it's the bird flu. They got no results or anything, of course. And can we trust them? Because the birds we see dying over the last number of years since Fukushima are all emaciated. And so now they're claiming that the bird flu is jump species, and it's in seals, it's in fucking goldfish, it's in everything. That's the industry doing that. They're very powerful industry. So we got rid of a couple of major bills that I couldn't catch up on. That's a huge deal. For me, that's a huge deal. And there was enough left over for a few tanks of gas. So I'm back to square one. I'm in good shape. And all of a sudden we finally caught up on outstanding bills. It always goes this way anyway, right? And that was friggin' awesome. And like I said, we're able to get out in the woods for another week now. We had a rather big show for tonight. We're not going to get through, obviously. That's typical on Sunday, because you do Friday, you do Thursday night after the show, you're gathering up more news and more information. So you got Fridays, Saturday, and then Sunday news cycles. And then you're trying to get through all of that. So we'll catch up on a lot of it tomorrow night or Tuesday night. Because there's a lot more going to show up by tomorrow in a 24-hour cycle, right? But you can't just skip through it, because that's not fair. These scumbags need to be called a scumbag, right? I'm a little shocked that people voted 25% no. People think it's okay for the military to shoot their weapons from a nuclear power plant so you can't shoot back at them. And you don't think that's a coward? Really? I'm disappointed in you people doing that. You haven't learned nothing all these years on my site? Good night, everybody. I'm going to end the poll on that sad, pathetic note. Dale Skewilla. Peaceware Albert. Good night, everybody. Atom. Dana Nasana. Yeah, thank you, Dana. Appreciate it. Obsolete Optics. Hey, bud. John Curtis. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Don't forget to give us a thumbs up if you made it this far. Don, Vincent. Thinker. Another Gmail. Kevin Blanche. Sandra. Hi, Sandra. Churchill. Adrian Johnson. Chelsea. Hi, Chelsea. Just scrolling up through the comments. Quick shout out. Chet Austin. if I miss anybody, it's because I'm squinting. It's almost 1 o'clock in the morning where I'm to. I'm pretty burnt out. It was a very long day. It was a very hot heat wave day. I wasn't actually going to do a show tonight. But if I don't do it, then the industry, it's the same as giving the industry a day off without them being spanked for being monsters and dummies. So I can't be doing that. I can't be doing that. Richard, good night, everyone. Like I say, you can watch the video anytime. Once I post it, it's here for you to watch at your convenience. Everybody's in different time zones around the world. Blue skies. And so it is what it is, right? I know Colette is out there. I hope you caught the information earlier. If you're confused, you can always call me, folks. 709-589-4406. John Cormans. The wise person. James Lucid. Hi, James. Thank you again, my friend. Joe Millo. Rock Nimeth. Dana, what will happen to your hard drive if the industry and corrupt government silences me? I actually have copies distributed out that I should update again soon, probably. Michael Allport. Did I get everybody or what? I got almost all of you people. All you wonderful people. Yeah, take your Chelsea. Obsolete Albert, Peaceware. Everybody. God bless everybody. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Black tea is really good if you're taking DCA because of the caffeine. I'm only doing 2 or 3 cups a day. You can take up to 10 cups, some people does a day. It helps your body absorb the DCA. Vitamin C is super important. Vitamin B1 is really important. Potassium pills are important. You're taking DCA to help you absorb it better. Good night, everybody. God bless. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Have a great day tomorrow. Great night tonight. We'll see everybody on the other side. Take care, folks. Yeah, good night, everybody. Take care.